What house rules do you use in your D&D campaigns? This one was asked to us by a user called Twin Steel on one of our videos, and they want to know what house rules we use. For us personally, a lot of them I think we forget because we use them all the time across multiple campaigns, and we've forgotten that they aren't part of the base rules, but nevertheless, here's a couple.
I literally had to ask you whether like passing through willing creatures was a house rule or actual rules, because there's so much stuff that's just like ingrained.
100%. So one thing I do that I think is actually an optional rule is hidden death rolls. I think that it increases the tension when you hide the death saving throws from the other players, because try as you might, when you see that they succeed, you kind of just naturally metagame a little bit. So if you hide those, it increases the tension a lot.
There's also the ability to use a health potion as a bonus action or feed a health potion to somebody with an action. I find just health potions, when you use them as actions, it almost negates your want to use them, because it's like, oh, okay, well, I've used this health potion which gives me a d6 plus whatever to my health, which this big bad guy who is literally right up against me and killing me actively is probably going to take away immediately next turn, and I'm going to be in the same spot I was before, or worse. It does not feel like, when you're fighting something, that it doesn't feel like a solution. It just feels like putting a band-aid on something that's going to get ripped off literally next action.
100%. Another thing that I do is I like to give multiple options for different checks, or if you can also argue to me another point as why you should be able to use this one, sometimes I'll accept it. I think that there are certain times where it's totally valid to say this is a nature check, but if you can explain to me why it's something else, that's fine, maybe we wing it. And I also like to suggest 2 different options so that you can have sort of a different way of handling this solution that maybe you have expertise in, and that sort of feels a little bit more character specific.
There's also the idea that you're not really supposed to be able to use 2 spells in a turn. We like to cut it up how you can use a leveled spell and a cantrip. You can't do 2 leveled spells, can't do 2 cantrips, but you can do up to that many. Because cantrips, for the most part, aren't like overly impactful, but the idea that maybe you could just do sometimes it's for intimidation factor. You do prestidigitation in order to just like, you know, make something happen to your character, your eyes flare up or something like that, and it's all for the aesthetic of you then doing an additional spell. Now, you can also do something like, you know, Eldritch Blast on top of another thing like that, but realistically, cantrips aren't supposed to be super impactful, and so the idea of kind of being able to use one for utility and one for damage does make casters feel a little bit more cool.
Not to mention that also, because we also do one has to be an action, one has to be a bonus action, there's not that many spells that are bonus actions, and so it's actually more balanced than you think, because there's not very many times where you can do 2 damaging spells, for instance. A lot of times one is utility and one is damage or something. One thing that I made is, I'm sorry, no flying races. I don't hate the idea of flying later on in the campaign, but I do think that rolling up an Aarakocra and flying immediately is way too strong, stronger than any other racial passive feature. So maybe if we're already level 6, then you can come back in with a second character that can fly, or you can have a magic item that flies. We'll talk about it. I'm not starting the campaign with flying races. I'm sorry. That's too much. That's too much. And otherwise, I think that kind of just working with ways to give them inspiration points, like the physical inspiration thing, in ways that motivate the character to sort of grow in a way that is beneficial to the campaign as well, I think is something that I like to do when I remember.
So there's a few. Check them out.